Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about animals. So the first part we want to mention is characteristics that all animals have, which are they're all multicellular, they are heterotrophic, meaning that they cannot make their own food, they have to eat food in order to survive. They're all eukaryotic, meaning they have all the things that eukaryotes have. We have a cell membrane, membrane enclosed organelles, we have a nucleus and all that. And we do not have cell walls as animals. And when we think about animals, sometimes we get a little confused because animals often have hair or feather, and we consider those as animals. But fish and spiders and scallop and jellyfish, those are actually all animals because they don't belong to plants or protists or fungi. So the only category left is animals. So when we think about animals, there are two different categories. There's the vertebrates and there's the invertebrates. The invertebrates do not have backbones or a vertebral column. You can just remember the backbone part. But the vertebrates do. And you can also call vertebrates chordates. So every chordate have 4 different characteristics, at least at one point during their development. So it doesn't mean that the adult form, the born version of this animal needs to have all 4 characteristics at the same time, but these 4 characteristics existed, possibly during the embryonic development or even after they're born. So it varies depending on what kind of animal we're talking about. But these 4 characteristics are a dorsal hollow nerve core. So dorsal means the back of you, ventral means the front, anterior is the head, posterior is the feet. So you need to know those 4 directions of the body plan as well. A nodal cord, which also kind of turns into the nerve cord, the spinal cord area, and then a tail that extends beyond the anus. So right now we don't have a tail, but at one point during our development as an embryo there was a tail, and then it goes away. And then the last one is the pharyngeal pouches, which are these structures on this picture, and they supposed to turn into gills because all of us land animals evolved from marine animals. So fish is our ancestor, and they had these pharyngeal pouches that turn into gills. They no longer turn into gills for us, but during our embryonic development, there are still structures like that that can be seen. Pharyngeal pouches, yeah, that's what we just said. So the gills are used for gas exchange, meaning gas exchange, oxygen coming in, carbon dioxide going out kind of situation. Chordates with backbones are called vertebrates. So the next one that we want to talk about are several essential functions that animals must perform to survive. So the first one is to maintain homeostasis, the balance of something, right? It doesn't mean it has to be the same all the time, but there needs to be a balance of some sort. So you need a balance of your body temperature, you need a homeostasis of your blood sugar, the homeostasis of the amount of water in your body, the homeostasis of the amount of waste in your body, oxygen, carbon dioxide, all of the above, okay? You also need to gather and respond to information because that's what allows you to survive, right? You need to interact with the world around you, whether it's the food that you're trying to get, whether it's within the population and other individuals that you need to interact with. So you need to gather the information and then respond to it. There's also obtaining and distributing oxygen and nutrients, right? Oxygen is really important for us because every single cell needs to do cell respiration in order for you to survive. And then the nutrient part, in order to do the cell respiration, you also need the nutrients. So all of your cells need that nutrients to produce energy, ATP, to actually power all the cellular activities. The next one is collecting and eliminating CO2 and other waste. As all those chemical reactions are going on in every single one of your cells, and when all your tissues are coordinating together, this entire process is going to bring out some waste, including CO2. And then there's also other solid waste that need to get rid of, that we need to get rid of. And then there's also reproduction that allows the population to continue to survive. So these are the 5 functions that every single animal needs to perform to survive. The next one is what are some body features of an animal body plan. So when you look at an animal, there are some features of it that we all share. So the first one, that most of it, yeah, that we all share. So the first one is levels of organization, right? When we think about the levels of organization, we think from small to big. We have cells, tissues, organ system, and the organism. So every single one of those lays out and put together to form an entire organism. So those different layers of tissues, for example, under your skin, you have all these different layers of fat and muscle and connective tissue. All those different layers of organization allows our body to work together. And then there's also a body symmetry. All the animals have a body symmetry of some sort, whether there is no symmetry, meaning that you can split the sponge in any possible direction and no two halves are going to be exactly the same. Radial symmetry means it's kind of a, it's like growing outward. It's like a firework kind of situation where you have this radial extension from the middle to all the ends, and you can basically, split this organism into any two halves, and the two halves are going to match with each other. So as you can see, if we cut right here, not to say you actually cut it, but if you can imagine cutting this organism right here, the two sides are going to be the same. You cut this side, they're going to be the same on the two sides as well. And then there's the one called bilateral symmetry, which is what we are. Bilateral means there's only two sides. For a human, we split in half and our two sides match almost perfectly, right? Some of our organs obviously don't match perfectly on both sides, but overall our body plan can be split into two halves, and they are mirror images of each other. So if you look at most insects, they're also bilateral. They also have a bilateral symmetry of a body plan. The next one is differentiation of germ layers. So when we look at a fertilized egg, which is also called a zygote, that one initial cell that we all came from, that one cell, what it would do is that it will go through mitosis and turn into 2 cells, and then 4 cells, and then 8 cells, and then eventually turn into a ball of cells. So this ball of cells is not as simple as it looks. It's not just a ball. It's different from, I don't know, it's different from an actual ball like this, for example, where it's just, all the sides are the same. When you look at it, they do appear to be the same. They're just cells, right, in a ball shape. However, they're actually different layers of this ball of cells that turn into different part of your body. So this is all pre-planned out even when you're only a few weeks old, maybe even less than that. A few days old, this little ball of cell will already give you a body plan so that you don't turn into just a giant blob of an organism, which is useless, right? We have arms and legs and head, and this, different parts of our body allows us to actually function. If you're just a ball, it's not going to be very useful, right? So there are different layers. So the first layer that we want to talk about is the innermost germ layer. Germ layer means this ball of cell. The germ is like not the actual bacterial germ. These are the embryo germ. Okay, so the innermost layer will develop into the lining of the digestive tract and the respiratory system. So if you think about your body, right, going from right here, you have the digestive tract and the respiratory system, and that's on the inside. And then we have the mesoderm, which is the kind of in-between layer where you have the circulatory system, the muscles, reproductive, and excretory organs. So excretory are your lung, for example. Oh, no, wait, not. The lung is the endoderm. So your liver, for example, your small intestine, large intestine. Well, the large intestine, I meant. The small intestine is not. The small intestine is digestive. Digestive is right here. Okay. So the excretory organs, the kidneys, for example, right? The kidneys and livers, those are the mesoderm. They're the in-between part. Your bloodstream, for example, that's your circulatory system. That's also a mesoderm. And then the ectoderm is the outermost layer where you have, if you just look at a person outside, you have the skin, you have the nerves right under the skin that allow you to feel things, right? Those are all the ectoderm. So this entire plan of endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm is already preset out even when you're just a ball of cells like this, okay? So that's a look of the ball of cells. And then there's also, inside your body, you have a formation of a body cavity for mammals specifically. So for humans, we have this kind of an empty space near your tummy, but it's not really empty. It's filled with fluid, and you have organs, having tissues, allowing those organs to attach to the other parts of your body so they don't move around and get all messed up. So this body cavity, what it means is that there's this fluid space in between the digestive tract and the body wall. So your stomach is kind of suspended in this fluid-filled space. And then when we look at animals, we can also differentiate the different types of animals by looking at something called blastopore and what it turns into. So what happens is you have a zygote, as that's your initial fertilized egg is called a zygote. And then when it divides quite a few times, you will have a little ball of cell, and this is called a blastula. So what happens is this little ball of cell will start caving in on one end of the ball, and then this caving in will either become the mouth or the anus of the organism. If this little caving in part is called the blastopore. So if the blastopore becomes the mouth, that will make you most likely an invertebrate, which is also called protostomes. So protostomes is for any organism that has blastopores becoming the mouth, and those are usually invertebrates. And then for us, we are deuterostomes, the initial caving in, which is determined like way early, 1 or 2 weeks of our life, that will eventually becomes the anus, just like this picture right here. And then the next one is all the organisms have segmentation. So segmentation is kind of different from limb formation. These arms, obviously, we have segments of our arms. This is kind of similar to this. But the segmentation, we want to specifically talk about insects that have different segments of body parts. They don't have bones, but they have they have the segments of the exoskeleton, which allow them to have different compartments of their body. And then there's also cephalization, which is the growing of a head, which doesn't apply to all the organisms or even all the animals, but a lot of the animals do have a head. So cephalization is a process of obtaining a head during development. And then there's limb formation, which happens to some animals, but not all animals. So for example, spiders, insects, they don't have limbs. They do have exoskeleton, legs. We can call them legs, but they're different from our legs, right? So we're talking about actual bony limbs, legs, flippers, wings. Those all came about from bones, and they're all kind of a homologous structure between all of us. The structures of our arm and hand is kind of similar to the flippers of fish and wings of birds. So we have all these features of animal body plans. As long as you understand all the things that I talk about, you should be good. And then lastly, we want to talk about a cladogram of animals. A cladogram is kind of a family tree of evolutionary relationship. Which organism is more closely related to which of the other organisms and which are not as closely related. And then in order to make a cladogram, we want to look at the adult body plans, right? So you can compare a human versus a chimpanzee and see a lot of just similarities just by looking at us, right? And you can also look for patterns of the embryological development. So during our embryonic stage, there will be even more similarities compared to the adult form. And obviously, you can look at DNA and protein and all that patterns, and then you form this evolutionary tree. Who's more related to who? So when you look at this picture right here, this is a pretty brief cladogram of animals. What you see right here is these are all invertebrates, and then right here we have the vertebrates. And what you see right here is there's a difference between a clade and not a clade. A clade means you have a common ancestor in all the descendants. So for example, if you look at this part and then both of these organisms, this is called a clade. If you have this part and all three of these organisms, this is also called a clade. But if you were to look at all of these, this is not a clade because they all trace back to this particular common ancestor, but not all the descendants are involved. These are not involved in this process. I know this might be a little confusing. We'll talk about it more in class on Friday. So what we do need to know is that for invertebrates, they're not a clade because not all the descendants are in the group. But vertebrates are a clade. You have the common ancestor, and all the descendants are all in the vertebrates group. Okay, that's all for this one.